All right. Welcome to After the Talk. I'm your host, Vicki Overton.
Hey guys, and I'm Natasha. How's it going? How's it going? It was great. Great show. Great show. Great show.
Yes. So we're getting ready to share with you our thoughts on tonight's segment, which was mental health in the schools, part 2. I think we covered a lot of ground. Natasha said she's representing the people. So I think she definitely asked her questions on behalf of the people. And I think I asked some questions on behalf of the other people. So, but I think we covered a lot of ground and got a lot of information. What you think, Miss Lewis?
I think that we had a script and we strayed away from the script, but I think it was relevant. And what we talked about and the responses. I just love the fact that I felt like they gave us pure, genuine responses as far as just to kind of hear what the teacher and the mom and the principal, just to hear those responses because the lady that was with the Board of Education, I mean, very seldom do, I think usually when things go wrong is when parents try to go to the Board of Education. But other than that, the parent and the teacher and the principal are the ones that, they have a lot of interaction with. And it's kind of like it's been a phone conversation. I think today it just made it really personable. And I can definitely appreciate the responses and their willingness to just answer whatever we asked basically today. So it was good, though. It was really good to hear the responses. Wasn't what I expected.
So we have a special guest with us here tonight that's going to share their thoughts on tonight and give us some candid or some constructive feedback on how they felt tonight went and share their thoughts about the educational system where it is now, and he might have some other messages he'd like to relay. So without further ado, let's bring him on in. Let's see. Woohoo, Mr. Nash. Welcome to our Gravity Talk After the Talk. How you doing, sir?
I'm doing very well. Thanks for having me. How are y'all doing?
Doing
great. Doing great. You got a smile on your face. You look like you're doing exceptionally well.
It's a good night. It's a good night. It's good talk.
It was a pretty good talk. And I should say welcome back, because you were one of our first panelists on our first Gravity Talks Mental Health in Schools, part 1.
Yes, ma'am. Yes, I was.
So what do you think about tonight? What was a little different than the conversation that we had the last time we all were together?
I'll tell you, one of the things that I really got out of tonight was hearing the Miss Tamara's perception and perspective on how things have been going. Actually, it kind of ties into what we were saying last time. We talked about a lot about what was on, what was being put on to teachers' plates and, how much we're expecting them to handle during this. And I think it emphasized the point that with everything we're kind of putting on them, it's that plate's, it's looking like some folks walking away from the buffet and they're only planning on getting up once, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Not to make light of it, but it was very, very real hearing her talk about the trust issues, talking about, the barriers that she's having to work through because, brick and mortar schooling you can't just pick it up and put it online. It doesn't transfer. It's not a one-to-one thing. So, all the struggles that she's talking about having to, figure out how to reinvent the wheel again really highlights that, we need to be supporting these teachers, and mental health is definitely going to be playing a role in that.
And Mr. Nash, you support us at 2 LEAs, 2 local education agencies. And what are your thoughts as far as, from what you've observed with other teachers that you help support as you've been providing school-based therapy? Have you noticed that there's a need to provide some level of mental health support, or even some of the professional development and training meetings that they host? Do you think now's a good time for us to present that option to the schools?
Absolutely. I mean, there's never a bad time, but I think the need is definitely elevated right now. I never have a collaborative conversation with a teacher that doesn't at some point say, well, how would you handle this situation, that they are personally dealing with already. So, extending that, sometimes that hand doesn't even have to be extended. Sometimes it pops out in the middle of a conversation anyway. So, we are seeing it, and we're asking them to do so much. We kind of need to make sure that everybody behind them is doing everything they can to lift them up too.
Yeah, that's a good point. What do you think are some things as a therapist that you could perhaps offer to them?
Well, a lot of times when we talk about mental health, we're real focused on the pathology and diagnosis and sticking a label. And we kind of get away from the concept of mental wellness.
Mhm.
We're not necessarily, everybody's not sick or well. It's not necessarily a black or white kind of thing. It's on a continuum. And the problems that we see, okay, we might see a problem, but it's really just the tip of the iceberg that's sticking up. And teachers are professionals who are used to keeping everything together and contained and in class, and making sure that folks never see that side. So the phenomenon of maybe breaking down after class or in the hallway when they're away from their students, being able to just talk to somebody with a clinical perspective, but not necessarily trying to put folks in treatment per se, but just saying look, these are some positive things that you can try. They can talk about some mindfulness type techniques, refocus them on why they're there and what they're trying to accomplish, and not necessarily the mechanics of I can't get this stupid thermometer to work, or
Mhm.
baby keeps coming to class without a mask, and I only have so many masks, and you know, but we
That's
can definitely help with that by refocusing and just having someone to talk to that can point the way toward back to yourself.
Mhm.
Yeah.
And then that self-care is important too. But I like what you shared about some of the frustration lies at the operational level. Like you said, they like Principal Wallace shared, the teachers are responsible for checking temperatures. They're not nurse aides or nurse assistants. That ain't what they do. But now they've been forged with having to do this, added to their workload. And like you said, what if the thermometer is faulty? That adds anxiety. You got 20 kids you got to check temperatures for as they're entering into the classroom, and you stuck on kid number 5. Then what? Then your anxiety kind of implodes. So that's a great point. But like you said, I like what you shared too. And this was something we had also suggested to the panel, not necessarily a formal way of treatment, but like a support group, so to speak, and maybe have it led by someone who's clinical, or at least if it's peer support that works on the other side, on the participant basis or the client basis, it could probably work well in the school basis as well amongst teachers and administrators.
Absolutely. I think a support group is an excellent idea, as long as, we're being considerate of time and, those type of constraints. Listening to Ms. Tamara tonight doesn't sound like that poor lady has much time at all to do
Mhm.
anything. But, yeah, fitting it in the schedule and being able to work around, but definitely offering that support group, I think, it's not just going to pay dividends for the teachers, it's going to pay dividends for the entire system.
Yeah. Wow. Great insight, Mr. Nash.
Thanks.
So as we cross over, what are your thoughts as far as this upcoming election? And I know we just jumped on our take from Mental Health in Schools Part 2, but I think you shared some great information, especially from a clinical vantage point, how we can wrap around and support our teachers and administrators. Because one thing that Principal Wallace shared is his bad dream is waking up and he had experiences fallout, where he loses these great teachers that he's recruited and retained. So fast forward, and Natasha made a great point about the billboard and the lottery money and where is all this funding going. And as we talked about how that funnels through, let's talk about the election. And Tamara raised a great point that it's more at the local level right now. The fight is on, and how we vote can also help determine how this shapes the supports that are available to our schools. So, what are your thoughts about this year's election?
Well, it's really divisive. I mean, people are really invested in candidates and parties, and I just, the thing I would ask folks to do is just to take the emotion out of it, listen to what the other side is saying, and then make a decision based on the facts that you can, and the opinions that you hear, because we don't really hear stuff when we're waiting to talk. If you're that opposition and I already know everything you say is wrong, then I'm just waiting for you to stop talking so I can make my point. But we got to listen to everybody, because it's not just one party's country or one candidate's country, it's everyone's country. So voting, number one. I do have to say, and I'm not trying to be political about this, I am concerned that our system there's a hole in, we're not really addressing asymptomatic spread. There's been some new articles that have come out lately. PLOS Medical actually just came out with one saying that we're probably looking at 1 in 5 cases of spread of COVID is from an asymptomatic individual.
Mm-hmm.
Our systems doesn't look like we're reflecting that reality. So
Mm-hmm.
I think that's something that people also need to take into consideration when they cast their vote. But above all of that, please vote. None of this means anything if you don't let your voice be heard.
Wow. You're exactly right. The point is to vote. But going back to one of the things that you mentioned, you're right, with the asymptomatic protocol is not a lot of supporting policy or procedure or best practices in play. And, what we're experiencing now with our president, we don't know how he necessarily contracted COVID. And from what they understand, it could have been an asymptomatic person. They're trying to do the contract tracing to determine exactly how and when. But like you mentioned, if you have an asymptomatic person in the school system, super spreader, it's like, then what? And I know that at first it was happening at the colleges with the clusters, and they were sending kids home, and then they realized, oh, don't send them back home to the parents who might be high risk. Keep them quarantined on campus in a particular dorm room or dorm building. And then it was like, okay, but how long do they quarantine? Like, it was just kind of a lot of chaos going on. But where do we glean from? We trying to lean on CDC and the federal level and the international level, the WHO. It's not really. I'm at a loss of words.
And the opposite. On the other hand, no one is going to argue how important it is to get kids back into school, and how the lack of social interaction is affecting folks. I mean, Miss Monique was actually talking quite a bit about social emotional learning that they're implementing in school, and a key part of that is that social interaction. And it's like getting a fax of the Da Vinci painting when we're talking about trying to do social emotional learning over the internet. We get the principle, we get the idea, but like Miss Tamara said, there's a difference between throwing up your lesson plan on a PowerPoint versus actually being in front of that person and teaching them and getting that personal interaction. And it's something you don't necessarily get from Hollywood Squares.
Yeah, that's I call them Hollywood squares too. You're right. I I, I think I think like when they do the pass the pencil and they do that whole thing, that was cute. But you're right. I think that it's a good band-aid, but a band-aid again is meant to eventually come off so that it can heal. So I think that, while it has its place, I'm all for technology, but there's a place and time for it. But then again, we're at this crossroad, and I think we touched on it earlier tonight. Is it still too soon to bring them back into the schools? It's like a catch-22. We want them in school because they're not really getting the chance to really learn and get the social interaction they need to get. But then when they send them in school, the PPE, yeah, it's a lot going on. It's like if then what, and the snowball continues. So,
but the experiment is on people and teachers and kids. So.
Yeah, yeah.
Things change every month, every week. This doesn't happen with COVID. That doesn't happen with COVID. And everything happens with COVID. So I still feel like they're just not sure of everything. I mean, everything changes so much that, they invested a lot of money in making sure that they got the virtual supplies. And it's like, well, let's just make sure we know a little bit more before we do this. They're going to be out for Christmas anyway in a couple of months. So let's just keep them at home. That's just my take on it. And I know they need the socialization. We do Zoom parties and Zoom gatherings just so they can see each other and say hello and check on each other. But that's still not the same thing. But, it just seeing, news stories and things of that nature of the tragedies and the fatalities of kids. It's scary, and that's just it's not about not having faith, but it's just about being realistic about these are kids.
Right.
The kids that someone else has to make a decision for, not adults going to college and going on campus, but these are kids. And so someone else has the power and the authority to make a decision that could potentially place them in harm's way. And it's very a possibility because, like you said, the asymptomatic folks, they just, they're everywhere. We just don't know who they are. And check the temperature all day long. that didn't work.
Negative and all this other stuff with the test, rapid testing, all that stuff is just
the availability of testing and getting tested, that's changing as well. So, you got everybody out here that's just kind of doing life. So, and kids are going to be affected. So I just pray that the best, they're safe and things of that nature. So,
yeah. Well,
one little end to that. I'm not a medical professional, but mental health parity is important too. It is absolutely crucial to your well-being. It's a whole picture. So, I think we should proceed as safely as we can. And I think we need to have something or come up with something to address asymptomatic spread. I just wanted to point out that that's kind of a hole that I'm seeing in a lot of the places that I'm looking.
Yeah. Well, Mr. Nash, and I ain't got no answers. I'm sitting here like, I'm thinking too. I'm like, how could we address it?
I'm going to call the principals tonight or tomorrow, and we're going to tell them, look, don't forget that part in case they didn't think of it yet.
Symptomatic. I'll text that to Miss Monica. She has that meeting tomorrow. So here are a couple comments from our streaming audience. Campbell shared that 19-year-old college student just passed away recently and was in perfect health. Again, adding to just the tragedy and the loss that we've been experiencing. Kenneth Smith, who's actually my brother, said, we'll have to live with this pandemic for a long time. A vaccine isn't a cure. We don't even have that. My kids will be learning online, safe and at home indefinitely. And in that order. So, I think like we asked Principal Wallace, how long does he feel that the hybrid option will continue and be available? He said at least through next year. But you're right, this is a whole new norm. And it may just be an ongoing option, especially until they wrap their minds around the vaccines, and or cure. I know they don't have a cure for the flu, but what will make it so that people can try and re-engage as normal as possible. And again, that's just a big question mark. So, but Mr. Nash, what were you gonna say, sir?
Yeah, and I was going to say, I know we all long for normal because, we haven't had it in a while. But, we're in the beginning stages of this too. So a lot of this, discombobulation and awkwardness and stuff not falling right, we're still figuring it out. It's
Right,
not kids that are learning here. Everybody's learning. And,
right.
nobody looks forward to a protracted, long, vacation away from normal, but we'll get better at it as time goes on too, you know.
Yeah. Well, thank you, Mr. Nash, for joining us tonight, and thank you for words of encouragement, encouraging people to get out there and vote. And I think Natasha and I double that or second that. It's important to vote these elections. Let your voice be heard. Be the change you want to see. And so, again, Mr. Nash, thank you for joining us tonight. Thanks, special guest. Thanks to our guests who participated in our panel earlier this evening. And as we mentioned before, Monday, this upcoming Monday, we have mental health gravity talks that will be featuring hip hop part 2. So that will be next Monday night at 7 p.m. So please continue to tune in and support us in that regard. And Ms. Lewis, I know you always share your thoughts about our sponsors, but before we do that, again, Mr. Nash, thank you so much for your time tonight. I know it's been late, but I appreciate you tuning in and joining us to give us your feedback.
My pleasure. Thanks for having me.
All right. Have a good evening. Stay safe and stay well.
You too.
All right. Good night.
Good night.
Okay.
That was great insight. Wonderful, wonderful. We want to definitely thank all of our sponsors for all of your support. Definitely want to thank you for your continued support. If you would like to be a sponsor, definitely we can reach out to us to help to sponsor our show. And we're definitely looking forward to continuation of Gravity Talks. It's going well. We're doing great. And I definitely know that, what do you think, Vicki? The awareness is getting real now. People are really tapping in and understanding what mental health is all about.
Oh,
and
yeah.
looking at it from a negative perspective with a stigma attached to it. So I'm
Yeah.
excited about where Gravity Talks is going. So, hey, if you're excited with us, you definitely want to say, hey, I want in. Let me be a sponsor so we can advertise your business and let folks know you're out there as well. So I think that was it. Did we have something else that we needed to cover tonight? The show, you've talked about the show next week?
Yep, the show next week, mental health and hip hop part 2.
Are you gonna rap next week?
Don't worry, you need to tune in to find out.
So listen, America, she might rap again. The first one was lit. Y'all hear me? It was lit. So, definitely, guys, thank y'all so much for tuning in again. Thank you, Mr. Nash. And we'll see you guys next Monday night at 7 p.m. Have a great night, guys.
Awesome. Thank you. Good night.